We often get the anecdotal feedback of these kind of throwaway comments of like, well, Gen Z are lazy, they're entitled. We disagree with it massively, those kind of blanket statements.
Gen Z requires a flexible work model. In some cases, they're also more productive because they're open to the way that their brains work differently, and they don't come at the traditional corporate model with these ingrained beliefs. They come at it with an open mind.
Gen Z hasn't made up a large portion of the workforce. We're now at age 12 to 29, we're taking up a larger part. And I've always said that corporates, either they start to work with us or they start to work for us.
We're not sitting here going, Gen Z are perfect and they're the model for every other generation. We're sitting here going, Gen Z are different than previous generations. And that is not a problem.
Yeah.
That is an opportunity. Podcast acknowledges the true and traditional custodians of the land we meet on here today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. We pay our respect to elders past and present and are grateful to be on this country.
So no one told you teaching was gonna be this way. Your lesson plans are jokes, your patience broke, you're feeling in disarray. It's like you're always stuck in report writing, when it hasn't been your day, your week, your month, or even your school year. But I'll be here for you.
When the students start to riot,
I'll be here for you.
even if your coffee's gone cold,
I'll be here for you. 'Cause you're there for them too.
Hello and welcome back to Podcast. My name is Amanda and I am joined by both Sky and Will as always.
enjoy.
Hello, hello, hello.
Oh, we are starting with the languages.
I think it is. It's episode 4 of the year. We need to start it.
Okay, and we are joined by someone absolutely incredible today. Once again, if you are familiar with last week's episode, you will have heard the wonderful Milly Bannister, and we have Milly with us again this week. So I'll just intro Milly ever so briefly in case you didn't hear the first episode. Our guest today is someone who knows a thing or two about turning big ideas into real impact. Milly Bannister is the founder of All Kind, a Gen Z-led charity that's all about giving young people the tools to support each other's mental health. From her early days as a content creator in New York City to running a not-for-profit back home here in Australia, Milly's career has been full of twists, turns, and lessons. She's here to share her journey, her approach to sustainable success, and why sometimes it's as simple as asking, because as she says, let others tell you no before you tell yourself no. Milly, it's wonderful to have you.
That was a lovely introduction. Where did you find that? On my Instagram.
Didn't
you?
I'm like you, Sky Amanda. You can rewrite my intros.
Yeah,
Instagram
just a bit
stalking.
tricky.
That's
Milly,
so great.
this episode is the one about being a Gen Z in 2025. So we would love to start today by asking, what is it like having a Gen Z-led organisation, and what does this mean to the current landscape here in Australia?
Oh, that's a biggie, isn't it? I would say, there's lots of other companies out there doing this in really amazing ways, but I would say that if we're going to be really loud about the fact that we are a Gen Z-led organisation, I would say that on purpose we're operating at this intersection of innovation and authenticity. And I think when we're in the space of youth mental health, it's crucial that we're operating at that intersection, essentially. I would also say that everything we do is shaped and led by values as well. And whenever we partner with other brands and companies, we make sure that they are value aligned as well. It's an interesting space to be in, and I feel like there's a lot of pressure, right? There's a lot of pressure to get it right and remain authentic and be transparent about mistakes as well. So as a founder, it can be quite intimidating.
But it's also incredibly refreshing. And I mean, we do a lot of work with Gen Z and in the Gen Z space and supporting youth orgs who work with Gen Z. And we often get the anecdotal feedback of these kind of throwaway comments of like, well, Gen Z are lazy, they're entitled, they don't work very hard, like all these things. And we disagree with it massively, those kind of blanket statements. But I suppose I'm curious, is this something that you've come up against in terms of people having kind of a preconceived idea of what it means for you to be a Gen Z-led org, to be advocating for Gen Z, when there are so many stereotypes that kind of shape this generation that they're also having to deal with on a day-to-day basis?
Last year, I accidentally kind of became a bit of a advocate, I guess, for Gen Z in the workplace.
Last year, I accidentally
a little bit.
became
Yeah,
Gen Z.
I did like one comment.
What was the Daily Mail headline?
No, I can't remember.
Yeah, I declared war on boomers.
Yeah, and then they would like
According to Daily Mail.
they would put my face or a photo of me in a very similar position right next to a boomer in the same position. I mean, sure, like clickbait, that's fine. But at least they kept my quotes in, you know what I mean? Like they were at least using fair journalism. And a lot of the time it was just, I guess, debunking the stereotypes and advocating for young people and trying to help educate earlier generations around the fact that, yes, Gen Z is different, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're less than. It just means that they're different, and perhaps you need some more information before you make a decision.
I love that. It really aligns with, we always come from the belief of we can't sit in judgment and curiosity at the same time.
That's right.
So if we're making judgments, then there's every chance we're not being curious and
100%.
stepping into an opportunity for learning. So I guess I'm curious, being this Gen Z-led org, like what do you see as the strengths of Gen Z that maybe aren't being acknowledged or accepted by those older generations?
I would say, living in line with values, authenticity and transparency, building kind of purpose-led lives as well. So potentially we'll see more Gen Z employees that are more satisfied in their careers because they're following their purpose, quote unquote. I would also say that although I guess Gen Z requires a flexible work model, I would argue that in some cases they're also more productive because they're open to the way that their brains work differently, and they don't come at the traditional corporate model with these ingrained beliefs. They come at it with an open mind. And I feel like from observing myself and my team and other people that I know, such as you ladies and Will, that, success as a term looks a lot more different for Gen Z. It might be more about work-life balance than it might be about these stereotypical understanding of success. But the path to get there might also look very different, and therefore so does productivity.
It's so refreshing to have like an ally on the same fight as me. It's because it's a big fight, right? And there's for so long, Gen Z hasn't made up a large portion of the workforce. Where now at age 12 to 29, we're taking up a larger part. And I've always said that like corporates either they start to work with us or they start to work for us. And that's just like Gen Z is leading the way in the industry. So it's so exciting. Have you?
It is exciting.
Yeah.
I think that we've been doing a lot of research and interviews and, we're super fascinated about it, but also how to break down the distinctions and provide training to our schools and to our, systems and youth organisations in how they can best engage our young people in Gen Z. And the values and authenticity piece is coming out just like you've said. It's coming out as an absolute, head and shoulders above everything. And so we're seeing a whole lot of changes, right? Like if you take something like brand loyalty, for example, I mean, I remember when my grandfather got like his gold pin for being an RACV member for 50 years, and like things like that was such a milestone, and it's still a milestone, but whereas it's like Gen Z are going to probably switch brand loyalties a lot faster, grounded in what values are, what the values are and what the transparency are of the organization and what, is this organization authentic? And because we're not stuck in these silos, it's like you hear something great. So I'm going to go in a TikTok, hole and do a whole lot of research, then go online and then read a journal article and then actually form my own opinion about it. So how is this different approach? How do you see that this is actually going to shake up our workforce We know there's some agitations that are occurring as Gen Z are entering the workforce, but also we're seeing agitations in our education system as well. How do you think Gen Z are going to help us shake it up in a really positive way?
I think Gen Z is very resourceful.
Yeah.
I think, from birth, they have been able to, if they don't know something, they've been able to find it out. And they've been, I guess, much more open to alternative learning models and spaces. And I think maybe by nature they're more curious as well because of that ability to access information instantly. I think on the other side of that, I think we see problems with information overwhelm. So that's something that we've got to, address with boundaries and certain designed thresholds in our workplaces. But I do think that Gen Z, because they are so well resourced, they will be able to find answers to things that we are still battling, cures, environmental, climate change, success stories we might start to hear. Politically, we might be less polarized. I just think that because, they've been, I guess, able to access more information and more news, they've been able to not only shape their personal identity faster and figure out their values a lot faster, they're then able to act on them with more confidence and clarity.
It's a rapid exposure as well, right? There's so much information going towards young people. I'm super curious as well, what we are big advocates for is we're not in the same generation. So intergenerational
collaboration. Once again, Will.
Intergenerational collaboration has always been the biggest part of the way that I believe, and I think that we believe that we build a future that's really exciting.
Yeah.
So it's how do we approach them conversations of how do we work together more?
That's right. And I think the resistance and the friction that you talk about comes from fear, right? It's, I'm going to be replaced. This employee doesn't respect me. They're not hardworking because they have different, ideas of flexibility than I do. I think, and I guess the resistance to trying to understand Gen Z better comes from a place of fear. So I think by working intergenerationally, we're able to kind of, cut out that fear and make decisions that aren't based in fear. They're based in, how can we be productive now to ensure that our future was built in collaboration with each other.
And our hope would be that it becomes an exciting possibility instead of it being something that's fearful. It's this is incredible. What can we learn and how can we adapt and grow our impact or whatever it might be with these new ideas and fresh perspectives and ways of thinking and being and living.
That's right.
I love that, so obviously with All Kind, there's a free course, a Good Mates training that young people can access to become a good mate.
Yeah.
Preventative mental health first aid.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just thinking about the flow on or the ripple effect of what that can look like, transferring how to be a good mate, looking after one another, and what we can learn from that in a workplace sense when we have Gen Z employees kind of coming through the ranks. What can we be doing as workplaces to better support Gen Z's mental health and well-being? I'm sure there's some really clear concepts in the training that we could be implementing. It's not just about mate to mate, but also what could be doing more generally to support them.
I think being a good mate means listening and, not just, I guess, making a space safe enough to have conversations that bring up stuff that's really important to listen to, but then also actioning any feedback as well, to make Gen Z employees feel not only seen and heard, but valued and understood, and well-resourced and safe, essentially. So there's that. There's, working in consultation with Gen Z and instead of, just reading news articles and assuming what Gen Z needs. But then I guess there's also things that you could do in terms of facilitating mental wellness with your teams as well. I think a lot of that comes down to flexibility and understanding that everyone has an individual experience of mental wellness. And so that could come down to the way that you format your work week, your work from home hybrid models, modeling good behavior, as in if someone in a leadership position takes a mental health day, that could encourage, younger employees to feel like they're safe enough to do the same. It all kind of, I guess, works in collaboration as a moving piece, right? Like it's about listening, feedback, and then iteration. Nothing's going to be perfect the first time, but as long as you're coming back to the start of that cycle, which is asking and listening, you're never going to go wrong because you can revisit at any time.
And if your team feels safe enough, Gen Z, I feel like, are pretty authentic and quite direct with the feedback as well, right?
Yeah.
Which is like a huge bonus.
Yeah.
And what will keep you getting that authentic feedback is by actually listening. It's like that growth that we are always learning.
Yeah.
And it's also, I think Gen Z don't want our managers to pretend we know that you don't know everything, right?
Yeah.
And it's that vulnerability that leads the way.
Well, I think it's that human first approach, right? It's like, I don't see you as being like the numbers that you enter in a spreadsheet or whatever it is that you do for work. I see you as a human being and your feelings and whatever it is that's right for you to share in a work context. But that's what I acknowledge and respect first.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's so much of, yes, being a good mate, but coming with that compassionate, empathetic lens. It's just going to open up, like, our workforce is only going to improve as a result of making these kind of changes and listening to Gen Z voices. Like we can't go like more backwards than a lot of work currently is. And I think change has to happen in order to keep us like functioning and keep our society going in a way that is prioritizing mental health, but also the needs and values of the next generation.
Exactly.
Look, I think it would be remiss of us not to mention that, of course, there's areas for growth with Gen Z. There's areas for growth with every single human on this planet. Like, we're not sitting here going, Gen Z are perfect and they're the model for every other generation.
Yeah.
We're sitting
Gen
here
Beta,
going,
you hearing this?
we're sitting here going, Gen Z are different than previous generations. And that is not a problem.
Yeah.
That is an opportunity. And how are we listening and how are we iterating? Because the changes we've seen in our world in the last 20 years, as far as technological developments and our approaches to a plethora of things, has been so, varied and vast and fast. And all of us, and Gen Z have grown up in that change and that quick growth and adaptation. And there's so many of our other systems that haven't caught up with that. And I think that's the friction we're seeing. We like to say Gen Z aren't the problem, they're the solution. Yeah. And like, does everyone have areas for growth? Absolutely. Yeah. But it's about choosing curiosity, not making a judgment and going, okay, great. So if this is an area for growth for you, how can we support you in this and how can we upskill you in this? Just like I'm sure someone from an older generation might be going, do you know what? This area of technology is an area of growth for me and I need help to upskill in this. It goes both ways.
And the reality of us, like as a society, of what we're facing now is that Gen Alpha are going to be 200 times different to Gen Z.
Yeah.
Gen Beta are going to be 400 times different to Gen Alpha because the rate of change is accelerating so much.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I guess, Milly, kind of to wrap us up, if looking at how you run All Kind as the founder, what is like one significant thing that you do when you are onboarding, I guess, new staff in your work environment as a Gen Z-led org that makes them feel like they are valued?
Coming back to your point around addressing the humanness of someone and all of the intersectionalities that make up a human being and not assuming to understand exactly what their experience feels like, I think one tangible way you can incorporate that into a business structure for staff is to keep things really flexible. So we've actually been onboarding at the moment, which is really, really lovely and exciting. But it's meant we've also been able to look at our structure. And so what we've done is we've implemented, this is also as much for me as it is for our staff as well, because I really need flexibility. Is implement core hours. And so you've got these hours that everyone needs to be, either online or at the office. And then outside of that, to make up the rest of your hours, it can be flexible. So you can work, from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. or midnight on a random Tuesday evening. It doesn't
work for you.
Yeah, as long as you're available during those core hours and then the rest are made up in flexibility, that makes everyone feel, psychologically safer in showing up to work, knowing that they can effectively avoid burnout. They can work during the hours that they feel most productive. And it also helps me as well in my humanness, because I can't work for 6 hours straight. So why should I expect my staff to?
Yeah.
And what a beautiful model that you're providing as well for your staff as the leader. Like that, I think that's awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us, Milly. It's been absolutely wonderful. And Milly is founder of All Kind. And you can also find the Good Mates preventative mental health first aid training available online.
Yep.
And the App
Let's
Store.
spread the word.
Yeah.
And where?
The App Store.
Oh, yeah. And on the App Store. Don't forget the App Store.
Yeah.
It's very Gen Z of you, Milly. We love it.
Thanks for joining us, Milly. We
Thanks for
appreciate
having
your
me.
time.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
I'll be here for you, 'cause you're there for them too.
Thanks so much for tuning into Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, we would adore it if you could go on to Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you listen to your podcasts, and leave us a review. 5 stars would be lovely. We would love to get this podcast into as many ears as possible so we can help and support as many people as possible who help young people. And if you're not already doing so, please go along to Instagram and follow us at podclass.aus.